What's up, everybody? It's your boy Boozadelic here, and welcome to the Boozadelic Chronicles. And today we have a special "You Matter, Be Healthy" edition of the Boozadelic Chronicles. And it is my pleasure to bring into the studio today my guest, Mr. Rick Scott of Vibrant Energy. And Rick is also, not only is he a vegan athlete, Rick is a music and sports entertainment public relations executive. Rick also represents the vegan and animal nonprofit organizations, or has been for several years now, and he purposely aligned his work with his core values. So, Rick, you've been a vegan now for 30 years?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate you having me in. I stopped eating animals 30 years ago. I am vegan 5 years.
What made you stop eating animals 30 years ago?
And no pun intended, but it kind of happened organically. First job out of college, you're not making a lot of money. I was an endurance athlete at the time, existing on pasta and vegetables every day. And even though I grew up in a meat and potatoes household, I kind of slowly but surely realized that I did not miss eating meat. Every day I was just eating pasta and vegetables. It was cheap, and a big fruit smoothie every day or whatever. And I was good, and it was sustaining me and obviously enabling me. When I said an endurance athlete, I was a bicycle racer. So long workouts and long training sessions. And it wasn't a conscious decision. I just kind of realized that I wasn't eating meat and that I didn't really miss it. So that's where that formed. And then probably about 2-3 years into it, so we're talking about 1990, probably about 2-3 years into it, which is now like around 92, 93, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go vegan. And it's very different now than it was then. I was getting most of my protein at the time by eating supplements. I wasn't eating avocado like I do now. I wasn't eating garbanzo beans and various beans like I do now. I didn't even know what quinoa was 28 years ago. And then obviously we didn't have a bunch of the, I mean, they're vegan, but they're, processed foods like the Impossible Burger and Beyond Burgers and things like that. So at the time I was getting most of my protein through protein powders and protein bars and then I thought, yeah, that's not so good. So I kind of incorporated some dairy back into my diet, thinking that I would get some protein from natural sources. What I thought were better choices at the time, such as I didn't go back to drinking cow's milk for the most part, but I incorporated like some cheese and some eggs or whatever and yogurt, dairy yogurt back into my diet in 92, 93. And then 5 years ago, kind of opened Pandora's box. One of my clients, who's an Olympic silver medal winner, Dotsie Bausch, and the founder of the Switch for Good nonprofit, which I'm representing here. She gave a TED Talk 5 years ago, and that became my light switch moment. That's when I learned too much. It was a combination of Dotsie's talk, and also I had gone to a website, which I had been directed to, and it was whatcodysaw.org. Cody is a guy, and I believe it's C-O-D-Y, and Cody is a guy who went undercover at various meat slaughterhouses, whether it's for cows, for chickens, for pigs. He went to a fishery, whatever. And so once I saw what really goes on in factory farming, once my eyes became open to the horrors of factory farming, I was done. That was my light switch moment, and I've been vegan ever since.
Let me ask you this about it, because I mean, I used to be into like bodybuilding, and I knew like all my protein was coming from like steaks, chicken, fish. I mean, I'm a little guy, but I was kind of eating like, Dwayne Johnson, like 4,000 calories a day. And it was just like, it hit me one day when one of my friends from Nigeria, she saw a picture of my steak that I put on social media. And she said, my gosh, in my country, that would feed a family of 4 for 3 days.
Wow.
And it kind of put things in perspective as far as, I started looking at consuming these animal proteins. But I knew that if I was going to like hang with the guys in the gym, or at least at that time, I thought, I should say, not knew, that the only way I could keep my competitive advantage in that would be to consume massive quantities of meat. I was not convinced that I could get adequate amounts of protein from vegetable sources. And
Mhm.
you know, you hear that, you know, now that all the protein you need is in vegetables, but see, at that time I was caught up in looking at grams of protein. And you know, the vegetables have substantially less, of course, but they still have the quality of protein. I guess the amino acid profile is what really makes the difference. And so, as a competitive athlete, I know you said you were into cycling, and I know you also were into hockey. I don't know when you got into hockey, but hockey seems to be like a meat type of guy's sport. So,
Yeah.
did you get a lot of shit from your fellow hockey players out there about?
uh, well, I was a hockey player who, I mean, you just said you're a little guy. I don't know. I'll give you my stats. 5'5", 132 pounds.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm huge compared
So,
to you then.
okay. So at my height and weight, when I went to college level hockey, in order to get stronger on my skates is when I started to ride a bike and race a bike. And this, as I said, this goes back to college. So um, eating as an at eating as a hockey player, eating as an endurance athlete are much closer together now than they were back then. I did used to get teased by my cycling teammates about how small I was or whatever else, but in cycling, it's actually an advantage. The lighter guys are the guys who can get up hills faster. So that's what was refreshing for me, having played hockey from the time I was single digits through college. It was always about size, and I was, of course, the small guy and had to be fast in order to survive, considering everybody is at least on average 5, 6 inches taller than me, and on average 50 pounds more than me. So, and I still play with guys that are, you know, that kind of ratio. Um, but yeah, it's different. So yeah, I used to get teased as a cyclist. Well, you'd be much bigger or whatever else if you ate meat or whatever. Once I went to hockey, or I returned to hockey 5 years ago, kind of, you know, coinciding with around the time that I went vegan. Um, uh, I pretty much just at that point, my skin is so thick and it doesn't even bother me. So nobody really said or made any comments or whatever. The interesting thing is that over time, now they all come to me. They
Right.
know they know the way I eat. They know the way I recover. And so as soon as anybody has a question about what I eat, you know, or what they should be eating or be drinking while training, what type of training they should be doing, muscle injuries or anything like that, I'm the guy that everybody comes to.
Nice. And so it's funny that you know you say that you're the guy because for like me, when I was trying to make my decision, I mean, you were like one of the guys on social media that I was really looking at. I said, man, this dude is training like a mother. He's fit and
Thank you.
he's nothing but vegetables. And there's a young lady in New York I follow too, who and you know, it's just I see the vegan this, vegan that. And so at first I thought, well, maybe I'll just become a pescatarian. So I did that for about like 4 months, and I felt better. And then I saw a few of the meals that you posted, which just looked, you know, awesome. And so I tried them, and it was like, wow. And then after I ate those, I just noticed that my energy levels seemed to be a little bit higher when I was able to do my exercise. I mean, I had periods where I have a illness called polymyositis, and I have some times where I really can't train. You know, it's almost hard enough just to walk. But then I have other times, like right now, I'm feeling great. And so, but I know that making that shift over to the plant-based lifestyle has been huge. I mean, my doctor said that was probably the best thing that I could have done.
Good
And
for you.
yeah, and but yeah, I just want to thank you, man, for just putting that stuff out there. I mean, I see it as it's kind of like your life mission, and I'm trying to convince more of my fellow brothers and sisters because in the African American community, I mean, I'm seeing more people leaning vegan now. But I mean, you know, most of us are like, nah, man, I'm not giving up my soul food and stuff, you know. But then I look at the fact that we die earlier. You know, we have diabetes, high blood pressure,
Yeah.
heart disease, and stuff can be correlated to our diets. And I think to myself, where does this start from? And I was like, well, if you go back when we were first brought over here, they didn't bring our food with us. And then when we were forced to work, slave labor and everything, we were fed scraps and figured out a way to make it taste okay. And so, but that part of us, for a lot of us, hasn't left yet. And so, just getting that word out there to me is something I feel empowered to do now. And I just really want to, like I said, thank you for kind of being a big part of that.
Wow, I'm humbled. Thank you. I appreciate that. There are, I mean, you just raised a lot of issues, and even before that, your comment of, and we want to address this now because let's talk about this. But we do need to go back to when you commented about protein, and because all protein originates from plants. Mm. So we can come back to that. But what you're just touching a little bit on now, in the African American community, there is a very strong vegan presence, a very strong and closely knit Black vegan community, of which I actually introduced you to a little bit, social media itself. But there are a number of followers, and there's a great documentary that I'm assuming it's going to be great, because I know the people behind it. Badass Vegan. I don't know if you follow John Lewis and Badass Vegan on Instagram, and if not, you should be. He is definitely one of the leaders in the space, and he is partnered along with John Sally, along with a documentary director. I'm sorry that I'm gonna, I don't remember his name, but a white guy who is behind, I believe, What the Health. He's been a part of a number of two influential documentaries in the vegan and plant-based movement. So it's my bad that I'm not remembering his name right now. But anyway, John Lewis, Badass Vegan, is partnered with him, and they have a documentary that is in production now that they're already promoting, called They're Trying to Kill Us. Mm-hmm. And it addresses food deserts where when you look at food deserts and also dairy or food injustice. And food injustice is, gosh, I was listening to an interview last night about this, where when you look in say a Black community and you look at what's available for them food-wise in a local supermarket, and the number of McDonald's, for instance, that are in close walking proximity. And you realize that the closest food options for them are things that are terrible for their health, the things that are making them sick, and that they don't have enough good quality access to fresh, a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables. And that it's an injustice. It's an injustice in that when we're talking about dairy specifically, and Switch for Good obviously is a leading voice in this movement of removing dairy from the USDA's food requirements, and Canada has already removed it, and it's up for discussion and consideration right now to remove the dietary guidelines, to remove dairy from the U.S. daily dietary guidelines. And it's just, when it comes to white folks like me, they say 65% of us either have a dairy intolerance or an allergy. When it comes to people of color, that goes up to almost 95%. I believe with African Americans, it's around 86% of African Americans are dairy intolerant or have a dairy allergy. One of the terms, and I think in my career, and you don't know about my personal life, but I did have an African American wife, and most of my work is in the Black community when it comes to music and entertainment stuff. And so a common phrase that I always used to hear after meals was the itis. You get the itis after eating. And what the itis is really, it's an allergy. It's an intolerance. You're supposed to feel energized and recharged and refreshed after eating. But instead, what do people do? They want to get on the couch and sleep. And that's a sign right there that your food is not serving you.
You talked about the percentages of African Americans, like 90%. And I know this correlates to success also in school for the youngsters. And I can think back when I was like in grade school. Yeah, I wasn't eligible for the free lunch because my parents both worked and had, pretty decent paying jobs. But I was still like, buy those milks and stuff. And I always felt like by the time I get done with a little breakfast that they served in the morning, and by the time I got into class, my stomach would always be upset. And then, my parents were always like, drink your milk. And I wouldn't really drink it. I would like sit there, and sometimes I would slide it over to my brother when they got up. And of course, he's taller than me because he got the calcium. But, I mean, I knew right then that it wasn't good for me. And then I'd have the same reaction. I loved pizza. And the same reaction when I eat pizza, it's just like you felt uncomfortable.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do need to correct you when you just said, "Oh, your brother got taller because he got the calcium."
Oh,
That's right there is one of the things that Switch for Good is really trying to make people aware of, that you can get plenty of calcium from plants. You can get everything that you need from plants. The calcium that's available in cow's milk is actually made for baby cows. It's the calcium that you get from fruit and vegetables is going to be better absorbed by a human. So let's correct that. The line of thought right there.
Oh, well,
okay, your brother's just taller. Okay,
he got taller because he ate the vegetables I gave him.
Yeah, all the vegetables that you weren't hip to eating back then that you would eat now, right? Yeah,
right. So wow, that's that's powerful, and I'm glad to see that that the movement within the community is starting to actually take hold, and people are actually starting to move that way. I mean, I think it's imperative.
I'm not the best person to speak on it, but I know that I've read a number of different articles where they talked about the foods that came from Africa. And that and even when you start getting to some of the Caribbean islands or whatever, where so much of it is actually vegan. It is plant-based in its original form. I don't know where or why that animals got thrown into the mix or whatever, but if you look at it, and again, I'm not the best person to speak on it, but if you do a little bit of research, you'll see that there's so much of and in a lot of ways, African Americans feel that by eating plant-based, that they're actually returning to the way they are supposed to eat, the way their ancestors ate. So as much as a lot of people will think like, their macaroni and cheese or their pig's feet or whatever else are things that are part of their culture or whatever, like look further back, look a little bit, and you'll see that much of the food is actually plant-based.
A book for you that you might want to take a look at is called Shifting the Paradigm. It's an African American guide to wellness through eating. And after we get off, I'll show it to you.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I read that a few years ago, and that was where I got that. We didn't bring our foods with us because it says that in that book. And then I was looking at what they're eating, and then I'm looking at what I'm eating now. And I'm like, wow. And then you said something a minute ago that was really powerful, that a lot of the Blacks that are eating, or African Americans that are eating the vegan meals now, or food or lifestyle, I should say, are actually feeling like they're getting back to what their ancestors want. So my next thing is, I see this is part of what you do too, the meditation and spirituality and all that. I myself personally, since I started eating that way, and then when I get into my meditations, I feel so much more connected now that I've been taking in quality foods, the foods that I was intended to eat, than I did prior to this.
I wrote a post about this, I think it was Sunday. I study a spiritual path from India, and the great yogis from India have always advocated a plant-based diet. And the reason being, when you're eating animals, you are ingesting fear and violence and oppression and their anxiety and their trauma that they've gone through. Think about it. Right before they're slaughtered, they are fearing for their lives. They are not voluntarily walking to their slaughter. They are being often dragged or beaten to their slaughter, and their body becomes filled with cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and then you eat it, right? And you eat it, and that it just only increases the stress and anxiety that is in your body already, and to live a calm and peaceful life, you're trying to minimize that cortisol. You need that cortisol for a reason. Like that's the fight or flight hormone, and so you don't want to be adding to the stress and anxiety and again, violence and oppression. You're ingesting that as well. Can we talk about your pescatarian days for a minute?
Yeah. So that's kind of funny that you brought that up. But see, I figured by eating eggs, because I loved eggs, there was like no way at the time I was gonna let go of eggs. So that was my staple. I was getting, my protein was coming from eggs. I like fish too. I love the cod and salmon and all that. And I was thinking, okay, the fish oil is good for my heart. And so I was really riding that, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna do this. And then when I watched the Game Changers, they broke down that even having like one serving of fish a week, that animal protein enough right there is enough to increase your chances of heart disease and all the other crap that comes along with it multiple times.
Yeah, the interesting thing about, and I'm glad you mentioned Game Changers. I think part of in my activism over the last couple of years, my father follows me on social media, well, at least Facebook. And one of the things that was new to him was that I am vegan for the animals. He initially thought that 30 years ago when I stopped eating animals, it was for health and performance reasons, and which is true. And the Game Changers keeps the focus on the health and performance aspect of it. They really barely ever even touch the compassion element, the way the animals are slaughtered and treated and bred and abused and everything that goes along with that. And there's a specific reason for that. They're obviously trying to expand their reach, and they're trying to burst the myth that you need meat in order to, like, as you were saying earlier, your brother got taller because he got your milk or whatever. Like, that's wrong. We're trying to change the way people think and view eating a plant-based diet, and letting people know that when you look on the earth, the biggest and strongest creatures on the planet all eat plants. That's all. Whether you're talking elephants, whether you're talking gorillas, whether you're talking rhinoceros or whatever, the biggest, strongest creatures on our planet are plant-based. And when I mentioned before about that all protein originates from plants, going back to your fish endeavors, your days as a pescatarian, you are also ingesting the plastics and the mercury and the poisons that they're ingesting out in the sea. The protein comes from the fact that they're eating algae in the sea. It's plants. And whether it's a land creature or a sea creature, all protein originates as plants. So do you want to eat directly from the source, or do you want to eat the middleman in order to get protein? So
I never looked at it that way at first. Well, up until really you said that. I mean, I knew that, consciously, I felt good because I wasn't like eating animals.
Right.
But,
right.
As far as that knowledge you just dropped on me about that, the whole middleman thing, that's deep.
It is. And that's why I say, like, when I reference having gone, like, I'm vegan for the animals. I mean, plain and simple. I think once you learn more about the way the animals are bred, the way they're treated, the way they're abused, and then you start to learn about the amount of resources that are dedicated to producing these things. Like a stat that I saw the other day, I'm really not a numbers and stats guy, but there was an email that Switch for Good had just put out, and 1,000 gallons of water to get 1 gallon of milk. Just doesn't make sense. we're in a climate crisis, whether anybody wants to acknowledge it or not. And I realize that half the country does not want to acknowledge it, and do something about it or whatever. But like when you look at the math of the amount of the greenhouse gases that are put out there, and in factory farming, the amount of land that goes to factory farming, and then you look at the amount of calories. And again, I'm not a numbers guy, but I saw even the other day where it's something literally like 18%, somewhere thereabouts, 18% of our calories, for those who do eat animals, 18% of their calories are coming from eating animals. But yet, like something like 85% of the resources and water and land go into producing that 18%. It just doesn't make any sense.
No, it's mind-boggling once you see the raw numbers like that. And my daughter was the one that kind of like turned me on to that aspect of it. Now, she's not a vegan. She still likes a little bit of meat here and there, but she doesn't feel good about eating the animals. And she was making statements like that, a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
we just need her to take the next step is all.
Yeah. And so
get rid of it completely.
I know she's still young. She's 28. Hell, I didn't make the move until I was 56.
Okay.
And but I think for one, you look at what's going on in the world today, and we're running out of resources. And that's because, like you said, it takes 1,000 gallons to make water to make 1 gallon of milk. Okay, what's going on in Flint, Michigan? You got shitty water.
Mm.
All right,
Yeah.
and then to raise that much cattle and farm all that, you're taking away valuable land and stuff, right? So that's another aspect people have to look at. And so then I think as far as making food affordable, right now, I know it costs more to go to New Seasons, or you guys don't have New Seasons, but you got Whole Foods out there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, it costs more to shop there, of course, but, you get better quality products. And the organic section in some of these like chain stores, they're getting better. But then sometimes I question, the validity of if it's really truly organic, like they say.
There are certain foods. 100%. Given a choice, I always choose organic.
Right.
Hands down. When I'm out, pre-COVID, when I used to eat out at restaurants, I can't always control that it's organic or not. And I didn't eat out a whole lot anyway. So given a choice, I always go with organic. But there are certain foods, certain fruits and vegetables or whatever that like you must really choose organic. Where like if you're looking at it from an economic standpoint, what can I afford or not afford? There are certain fruits and vegetables that are kind of like in skins, say like bananas, for instance, or whatever, where it's like, there's a protective layer or whatever. So it's, you can get away with that. Strawberries, for instance, are one of the ones that like it's one of the most sprayed pesticides with pesticides. So that's one, like, when it comes to your berries, your strawberries, absolutely spend the extra money for organic. But maybe on something else, you don't necessarily, potato, for instance, I don't think you necessarily like must choose organic. But yeah, this kind of gets into a little bit of the food injustice thing that we were referencing a little bit earlier, because when you look at the history of government subsidies and everything, and you talk about subsidizing, say, Black communities with cheese, right, and dairy products and things like that, when they know that 86% of African Americans cannot process it or are allergic to it. So it's, you reference diabetes and things like that. It's so literally the government is like, they are knowingly making people sick.
Right.
People of color. So that's a real injustice right there.
Yeah, that's part of that systemic process that they've been talking about for, months on end right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that just can't grasp that concept. Oh, the government wouldn't purposely do that. Please. You have to look at the history. That's what's been done. Even with like vaccines and stuff over the years. Yeah, I'm wondering right now about this little COVID vaccine. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it just makes you wonder. I can recall learning about the Tuskegee experiment and the fact they want to try this out. They say, the Gates Foundation, they want to start with the folks in Africa. And I was like, now do they want to start over there in Africa because they're not going to be able to if the virus really grows like it is here because of resources. They might not have the Medicare, the medical capabilities that we have over here, or is it because they feel that they're expendable? And so that's the kind of mindset
Right,
I get to start
right.
thinking about. And so I'm saying, well, as soon as the elites get those shots, and after a
Right.
few months and they're okay, then I'll be ready to try.
Right. Well, one thing that I have not heard anybody talk about yet, and I don't know any answers, and we're certainly not going to get into the whole anti-vaccine thing, because I can't say I'm for that per se. But like, I never get a flu shot, ever get a flu shot. And I was at a pig vigil. Gosh, I don't know what time it was. Months ago. I don't even know what we're so flipped upside down right now. I don't remember exactly. Earlier this year, I was at a pig vigil talking to some people and referencing flu shots or whatever. And flu shots are not vegan. There's bovine, which is from a cow, elements to it. So one thing, and maybe it's too soon, which is why I have not heard any vegan authorities or doctors or anybody talking about this potential vaccine. We probably don't know until we ever get it. But like, will it be vegan? Because I've seen different people ask, like, hey, will you get the shot? Will you get it? Like, will you get the vaccine if, when we have one? And I've seen some people say no, because they're saying no based on political reasons, of course. My question is it vegan? Like, are they knowingly going to be injecting into us, animal components? And in which case, then it's like, and then it's a whole other issue, because then you might find a bunch of vegans who are going to say, no, we're not going to do it. So.
Right. I'd never actually thought about that. I mean, I knew about the bovine thing, but it just kind of slipped my mind. But
Yeah.
thankfully, I have not taken a flu shot. Now, my rheumatologist, she's on me every year about, did you take your flu shot? And I'm like, nope. And she said, well, you're at higher risk. I said, yeah, but I mean, I just don't trust those flu shots for one, because there's so many different strains of flu out there. It's kind of
Yeah.
like taking a guess at which one's actually going to be the most likely to infect a bunch of people. And I recall back when I used to get them, those are the years that I remember catching the flu. I haven't had flu now, and I don't know how long.
I'll tell you, one of the things that you may or may not have noticed already in your transition is a stronger immune system now that you have dairy out of your system. Um, you know, Dairy is a mucus producer no matter what. That mucus usually is an allergic reaction when you start filling up with mucus and everything. That's a sign right there that you are intolerant to it. Basically, the way it works, like when it comes to dairy, is that again, milk from a cow is made to take a baby cow and grow it as fast as it can to like a 600-pound animal within a matter of months. Most humans have a gene that can process and absorb cow's milk. Somewhere around like age 4 or 5 in a human, it shuts off. In most people, the few people that gene does not shut off are the people who can process these things and are not allergic or intolerant. But most humans, it shuts off at like age 4 or 5. You don't need it anymore. More importantly, we are, I don't know if your audience knows this, but humans are the only species that takes the milk from another species, which is strange.
Yeah.
And the stranger part is, before a lecture that I gave last year at LA Veg Fest, one of the doctors was up there and he was telling a point to kind of illustrate the thinking that most humans have. And he was telling a story of how his wife was pregnant and he was thinking, they had run out of milk. And he was like, well, maybe I should just take milk from his wife's breast. and just put it on his cereal. And everybody in the audience, of course, reacted like, "Oh, that's gross," and ew, whatever. But the reality is, milk from a human is actually made for a human.
Right.
So hormones and all the growth elements and everything that are in there are bioabsorbable, and therefore good and natural for a human. So why on earth would oh gosh, I would never drink milk from another human, except when you're being nursed as an infant or whatever. But I'll take it from a pregnant cow. There's a disconnect there, and people just need to really look at it and think about it for a second. Like, yeah, it's just wrong.
Wow, this is such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, you're hitting on things that I never thought about in my transitioning into veganism. But
Well, one of the things that people often don't think about in their transition also, and that's why I said, like, when I talk about my light switch moment, is kind of like you open Pandora's box, because then you start learning. You start learning about factory farming, and you start learning about the science behind what dairy or eating animals does to you. And that's when you start finding that knowledge or whatever, there's no turning back at that point. There's just no turning back, because you just realize like how wrong it is. And I mean, again, people think like cows are, they have these happy cow commercials or whatever else out there, and they think that cows just produce milk, that's all they do. Well, guess what? A cow produces milk by being pregnant. So how it works, the evil process, and I'm going to get graphic here, so I hope your audience won't mind. I'm considering there. But so a cow does not get pregnant naturally. There is a metal object that is forcefully inserted up the vagina, along with a farmer's hand up to his elbow, that I think might even go through the anus, to help guide this metal device in there to fertilize the cow against their will. Therefore, it is rape, right? They have no. They carry the baby to term or whatever. Within hours of giving birth, their calf is ripped away from them, never to be seen again. There are a lot of videos out there, and you can Google them. Anybody wants to look at it on YouTube or whatever else, where the mother cow cries, mourns. You hear, like, it's unmistakable cries that the baby was just ripped away, never to be seen again. If that baby is a male, that baby will be slaughtered very soon, within weeks, as veal. Okay? If that baby is female, it will grow up and be forcefully impregnated and go through that cycle. Now, that mother who just gave birth will be impregnated again very quickly, because she needs to keep producing milk. And basically, they will use these cows up kind of, it's usually about 3 to 5 years that they will be in the dairy cycle. And then they just, once they are deemed as no longer producing enough milk, they are then sent to slaughter, anywhere from age 3 to 5. But that is the life of constant rape. They give birth, their child is ripped away from them, and then they are raped again, and constantly over and over again. And that's why they often say, like, any mother out there, like, how could you possibly support the dairy industry? Could you imagine your child being ripped away from you at birth, never to be seen again, and either sent for slaughter right away, or being enslaved and raped over and over again to produce milk? And a normal cow's life, I believe, is around 14 to 19 years. But they are sent to slaughter, the ones in the dairy system, between 3 and 5 years old. It's just a
that is sad. And it makes you think of who decided that they wanted to start eating those animals anyway.
Yeah, well, and in this case, it's even for the people, and that's why we say, like, for those who say, "Oh, I'm vegetarian, I'm good," and I was comfortably vegetarian for 25 years. Once I learned what was going on, and I realized I never thought about it. I never thought about how these animals get pregnant, and that they must be pregnant in order to produce milk, and that it is factory farming. These animals are bred only to be used for food or to produce food. So that's why even, because again, we could talk about chickens or cows or even fish who are, there are fisheries out there who are raised and bred only to be used for food or whatever. But like in this case, when you're saying, okay, I'm not going to eat animals, but I'm going to eat the products that they produce naturally. But it's not produced naturally. It's not produced naturally. It would be nice to say like, oh, okay, gee, our cow got pregnant and wow, we're gonna have milk this month or whatever. Like it doesn't work that way. It's constantly and that's what they call it, animal agriculture, or factory farming, because that's exactly what it is. They are raised and bred specifically for this. But most people don't want to think or acknowledge what goes into producing that cheese that they just can't give up. You mentioned earlier you can't give up eggs, and eggs are a whole other situation. Chickens, when they are in the food system, the males are crushed. When they are born, the males are instantly put into a crusher because there's no value in them. They keep a certain small number of them in order to fertilize, of course, the female chickens, whatever. But most of them are put into a crusher live, put into a crusher. Again, easy to find the video on it. And the females, of course, are going to go into this system of laying eggs, and they very quickly they get what's called debeaked. And debeaked is a very painful and often debilitating process that sometimes kills them in the process of where their beak is burned off. So that way, when they're put together, we've all seen pictures of or video of chickens in a coop or whatever, and there's hundreds of them. They're all on top of each other. There's no space between them, and they have to debeak them in order so that way they're not pecking each other to death or whatever. All like that. So they are painfully, their beak is painfully burned off or sliced off with a burner and then, kind of cauterized. But that often kills them in the process and or maims them at a minimum. So eggs, like just the process, the whole thing is just, so horrible.
Wow. Yeah, because eggs, after I let them go, I didn't miss them. And then one day I tried to make some eggs out of this recipe that I found for using like garbanzo bean flour and all that.
Oh,
Didn't
yeah.
taste all that good. And then somebody hit me to Just Egg. You familiar with that product?
Yeah, I am. I haven't had it because an egg wasn't a thing that I like. Oh, I miss it. I need to have it. So.
But yeah, I was amazed at how well it tastes. I mean, you could actually make an omelet using the vegan cheese, that stuff, and cut up your vegetables, and it doesn't taste any different than the one with the egg. I'm not exactly sure how they made it taste so close, but it's way better than that garbanzo bean flour I tried.
I don't know about garbanzo bean flour. What I know about garbanzo beans is that when you open the can, and canned beans are unlike fruit and vegetables, beans, like when they're kept in cans, maintain all their nutritional value. So, you can feel comfortable in eating them from a can. It's the only thing that I eat from a can. That liquid that it comes in, they always say save it, that you can use it as an egg substitute.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever tried tofu scramble and making scrambled eggs, if you will, out of tofu. That's good. I've had that. But eggs were, as I said, were not necessarily something that I was stuck to, and felt that I needed to, something, quite similar in order to replace it, in order to feel good about, okay, I didn't give up anything. I didn't give up anything. I will go back to something that you mentioned before, because like I can relate to you. My last thing, the last vestige, and everybody always has one, and everybody's is always different. But this goes back to even my days. Like, I'm from Philly. Maybe it's a Philly thing, but yeah, we love our pizza too. right? I know you referenced your love of pizza. And going back to my bicycle racing days in college, it was kind of like a tradition. We would race on a Sunday, and then after we would get pizza together. And it was a Sunday tradition that I maintain pretty much to this day. That, at the end of the work week, the end of the training week or whatever, I've trained hard. I eat very clean all week or whatever. I'm going to reward myself with some good pizza. And when I was saying, okay, I'm done, no more dairy, it took a bit. It took a bit to find. There's a lot of trial and error that you're going to have to go through when you make the decision to go plant-based, that you're going to have to try a bunch of different products to find some of the things to replace what you're no longer eating. And for pizza, there was a lot of trial and error to find one that is satisfying to me. I made the decision in my mind, I'm sticking with it. And until I find the right one. And one of the amazing things I knew you were saying before, like, oh, see the garbanzo beans, making eggs out of that liquid, aquavava is, I believe, what it's called. It wasn't any good. The amazing thing about going plant-based and going vegan is that your taste buds change.
Yes.
Taste buds change. And so as much as you have a certain taste or a certain craving in mind or whatever, it's amazing what you will all of a sudden, like if you stick to it within a matter of weeks or months or whatever, like your taste buds change. I believe it's 8 weeks, they say it takes your taste buds to change. So you all of a sudden develop new cravings. You find yourself craving vegetables or fruits or other things that you never in your lifetime thought you would ever crave. And once, in my case, like once I found that satisfying pizza for me that was vegan, whatever, like then it's easy. Like at that point, like, okay, that was my last bastion. That was the last thing that I held on to. I gave up everything else before, and that was super easy. But the one thing was like, I need a good satisfying pizza. And until I found it, and then, as I said, my taste buds changed, and now it's like when I think of pizza, like that's the taste that I crave. So
that's cool.
With it.
Some of the vegan pizza out there is not bad. Check this out. So I was in Oakland for a Raider game back in I think it was November, and I have a friend that I went to grade school with, middle school, named Craig, and I told him I was a vegan because he wanted meat for lunch. And he said, I know a place we can go. So he took me to this vegan soul food joint called Soleil's. And I was really surprised. And I'm sure it was probably loaded in sodium still because they had to add all the sauces and stuff. But it was actually a good cheat day for me. I had these amazing things that tasted like a pulled pork sandwich. And I was just like, wow, it's amazing that what they're doing with the vegan food now,
Yeah, I think I was referencing that earlier, like how when I first in 92, 93, when I first started experimenting with going vegan for 6 months, it's extremely different now. It's super delicious now. The foods that are out there, like you really can't tell the difference anymore. It's amazing how much it has changed. But you're touching on something that I would like to make sure that we address today, and that is, how somebody would transition into it. And also there's a difference between eating vegan and eating whole foods plant-based, which I try to do most of the time is eat whole foods plant-based. And when we say that, what we're trying to do is we're talking about eating food as close to the way it came out of the ground. That's kind of the goal, how it was grown. Processed foods are foods that tend to be loaded. You just referenced sodium before when you talked about the soul food restaurant, sodium, fat, other fillers, other chemicals, and things like that. So as much as something can be vegan, believe it or not, Oreos are vegan.
Yeah.
If you eat a box of a box of Oreos, like you still ate a box of, there's a whole lot of sugar and fat and things, nothing that is good for you or nutritious. And that's why, like, you can eat a whole foods, a junk food vegan diet. It's pretty easy to eat a junk food vegan diet, and that's why we try to specify like a whole foods plant-based diet. So that minimizes the amount of processed foods. So whereas like Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger and a bunch of other substitutes out there, a lot of the cheeses and stuff like that, like use them in your transition for sure. But then you might find that as you go along and you get, through the process or whatever, and your rough days are behind you or whatever, you might rely on them less. I can't remember the last time I ate any of those burgers, and I'm super glad that they're out there because they're really not meant for me, who hasn't eaten an animal in 30 years, but they're made for people who are newly, who want a healthier alternative to eating a burger made from a cow, or pork or chicken or whatever else like that. So I'm very much like, people often ask me, oh, are you in favor of them? It's like, yeah, I'm in favor of them. Will I eat them? Yeah, I'll eat them. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it, but I don't eat them every day. As I said, I can't even remember the last time I ate it. Sometime maybe at the beginning of the year. I don't really recall. So it's just not something that I normally put into my diet. But absolutely they are there, and they are great things to help you walk into that transition.
Well, I'm glad you touched on that because that's exactly what I did. And I've had some of that stuff sitting in my freezer for a while now. And I finally, the other day, my wife was having some hamburgers, her and my stepson. And she said, well, you want anything? I said, you know what? I think I'll do a vegan burger patty today. And I did one, but I hadn't touched it in a while. And I was like, I got like 3 or 4 bags that just been sitting there because I've been going more towards the whole food thing instead of
good for you.
The actual process part of it. But like you said, it is a great way to transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would get into in transition, and I wrote a 2-part article last year. I have 2 different hockey player friends from the rink, and one tried to go plant-based, and he is an ER doctor who's up to his eyeballs right now on COVID patients. And he, big guy, over 6 feet, probably 185, maybe 200 pounds. And he went plant-based, and he was eating salad 3 times a day. He was starving. Another happened to be a female hockey player, and she went plant-based or tried it, and she gained weight. And I didn't understand how these things happen. So I interviewed an expert at the time, Dr. Cyrus Kambata, and who has his company is called Mastering Diabetes. So your listeners might want to check out Mastering Diabetes. But he taught me a process that I now share with everybody and through these 2-part articles that are available at the vibrantrg.com site. But he talks about walk into a plant-based diet. And what he advocates with his patients is that you spend, say, the first week, we just change 1 meal a day. Like this week, I'm just work on breakfast. Eat whatever you normally do on your lunches, your dinners, and your snacks, but your breakfast is going to be vegan. And then week 2, you now address lunch as well. Week 3, dinner. Week 4, your snacks. And basically over the course of a month, you've now transitioned. And so that the idea is that you walk into a transition so that it becomes a lasting transition. For the people who go cold turkey, which a lot of people can do, but a lot of people can't, because it's overwhelming when all of a sudden, like, well, I don't know what to eat. And in this case, this one guy was eating salad 3 times a day and thinking that was the right thing to do. And the one who gained weight, she was eating a lot of processed foods. And that's why I was explaining the processed foods are loaded in fat and sodium or whatever else. And so she was ballooning. And so, she abandoned it because of that. So it's learning on what it could be a lot. Like if you think about it, you mentioned your change at age 56. So therefore for 56 years, you ate a certain way. It's overwhelming, or can be, to all of a sudden have to change everything overnight. Now, one thing that I often caution people about is you can make the choice and transition slowly into it, or you can wait and have to transition overnight when your doctor gives you certain news. I mean, there are plenty of people who all of a sudden get told they have cancer, or they have a heart condition, or they have diabetes or whatever else, and all of a sudden their lives depend on transitioning, becoming vegan, plant-based immediately. I know a lot of people who have done that. That's a harder path than doing it willingly and walking your way into your transition where you have some control over it. So I often, there's a joke I tell people. I was in one of the hockey locker rooms after a game, and it was me and one other vegan hockey player in the locker room with me. And then the third person was a young guy. I'm 55. This was a guy who was 26. And more than half, less than half my age. And I looked around the locker room and I said, "Oh, there's nothing left in here but us vegan hockey players." And he, of course, protested, "I'm not vegan, I'm not vegan." And I was like, "You will be." I said, "Whether you decide to do it one day or your doctor tells you to, you will be." So.
Yeah, that's what I used to always tell people when they'd ask me about it. I said, it was going to come to a point sooner or later where I was going to have to do it. I looked at the different health issues that I have. This rare muscle disease. I mean, it's so rare. I had a better chance of hitting the lottery twice than actually being diagnosed with it. But it just made perfect sense to me. It was like, well, if I got an inflammatory disease, maybe I need to limit the foods that might be causing inflammation. And so that was a big decider. So once I decided that, and after I watched the Game Changers, that I was just gonna cut off the eggs and the fish and all that, there was no problem. It was a no-brainer. I never looked back.
That is awesome. And I didn't know what your condition was, and you referenced a muscle disease, and and then also you referenced inflammation. And I think that's a big part of why people transition is the inflammation. Chronic inflammation leads to chronic disease. Inflammation itself leads to chronic disease. So I have a story that actually I literally just published, and I'm going to start promoting it out there. And you mentioned a rheumatologist earlier. I interviewed a rheumatologist for a column on arthritis. Because I stopped eating animals 30 years ago, I don't remember how I felt. Because oftentimes people ask, "Oh, well, did you notice a difference?" And for me, when it's too long ago for me to remember, did I notice a difference? And then when I get to, 5 years ago is when I got rid of the remaining dairy. Not that I wasn't drinking cow's milk. I would drink cow's milk when I kind of fell victim to those commercials that we see out there of the athletes chugging chocolate milk after a workout. And whenever I would be on the road, whenever I did not have access to my blender to make my protein smoothie after my post-workout, like I always do, I was like, well, let me go to a convenience store and grab a quart of chocolate milk because it does a body good. The new Switch for Good ad campaign is milk does a body bad. And people should check that out. It's a brand new commercial campaign that was just launched. A lot of famous faces that they might recognize in the video. But in any event, so I would be away from my blender and I take this chocolate milk and I would drink it. And within hours, you mentioned earlier about your stomach rumbling as a child when you eat certain things. My stomach would start rumbling and it would come out for the next few hours. It was not a pretty process. And I had never thought of myself as being lactose intolerant, or dairy intolerant in any way, shape, or form. But that's exactly what that was.
Right.
And but I did, although I wasn't drinking cow's milk, other than those rare occasions, and then I learned better, I would still eat a little bit of dairy and yogurt and everything. And so, but once I got rid of that 5 years ago, I experienced what I describe as somewhat of a miracle. I had broken my wrist twice. I broke it once in '83. I was 18 years old playing ice hockey. And then I broke my thumb just very close to the wrist. I broke my thumb 2-3 years later in a bike race. And 24 years later, I broke my wrist again, same wrist. And when I went in, we do the x-ray and the doctor throws the x-ray up on the screen. And the first thing he does is like, look at all that arthritis. And he's talking about because wrist broken twice here and the thumb broken right there. He's like, look at all that arthritis. And I always used to feel it. I always felt soreness. I used to tape my wrist often when I would go to the gym. When I returned to hockey 5 years ago, I was wearing a brace that they gave me when I broke my wrist the second time, and I depended upon it. And as a hockey player, you're constantly relying on your wrists, and so I just figured you had to live with the soreness. We think like, once we're in our 50s, you live a life of being a competitive athlete or just anybody active, and anybody that's had any kind of an injury, whether you're an athlete or not, you figure you're going to have some aches and pains from injuries, whether it's a broken bone or a joint injury or anything like that. And so I figured, well, it's just natural. It comes with aging. So I get rid of the dairy, and slowly but surely I realized that my wrist feels good. And I was like, wow, I'm not going to wear the brace today when I'm on the ice. And it started to feel so good. I never went back to the brace, and I attribute it 100% to getting rid of dairy. 100%. I feel absolutely nothing in this wrist that was broken twice, and the thumb. I never feel it, ever. And that's all like removing dairy, which is inflammatory. It's an inflammatory. So the rheumatologist who I interviewed, he has an autoimmune arthritis, which is different than an osteoarthritis, which is normally a wear and tear or the result of an injury or anything like that. But he's had a lot of success where his patients experience benefits of going dairy-free and going on a plant-based diet. So my latest column, the vegan hockey player column, which is on, it's on vibrantenrg.com now. And I don't know when you're going to air this, but it will also be posted on the Switch for Good site. It will be posted on the Jane Unchained News site, and it will also be posted on the Vegan Magazine site over the next couple of weeks. So people might want to read that, anybody that is dealing with arthritis and inflammation.
Okay, I'm glad that you actually dropped those in there, because I was just about to ask you, as we got to wrap this up, about where they could find you in this information, but you kind of pretty much said it. So I'll be sure to include that in the description. So
yeah, absolutely. And anybody, I get contacted on a daily basis with questions and things like that. I'm happy to help people and point them in the right direction or answer their questions myself. And they could contact me through Instagram, RickScott16, Rick.Scott on Facebook are two of the most popular. You can find me on Twitter as well, but that's under my company handle, which is Great Scott PR. You can find me that way. So yeah, absolutely can reach out. And then obviously through the Vibrant Energy site, vibrantenrg.com.
Okay, well, that was a very valuable interview, Mr. Rick Scott. I greatly appreciate that you took the time to come back in. We were supposed to do this a couple of weeks ago, but I was a little bit frazzled with my computer, and I ended up somehow clicking into the wrong meeting. So we didn't.
Hey,
anyway, so thank you for getting me back in the schedule.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you and share this information with your viewers. It's important. It's important for people's health. It's important for their quality of life, and certainly important for our planet.
All right. Well, viewers, I want to thank you for watching, and make sure that you go ahead and like this video. Make sure that you subscribe, and by all means, share this video. This is the type of information that we need to be making viral, instead of all these little fights and stuff that we see on these videos on YouTube and stuff. So thanks again for tuning in. Everybody have a great day. I'll say Nitaru, my friend.